Good afternoon. Hello, my name is András Inotai. I'm the head of unit for innovation policy and access to finance in the Directorate General for Research and Innovation in the European Commission. And it's a great privilege to welcome you to today's panel discussion on accelerating scaling up in Europe. We have an excellent panel for you today. I will briefly introduce you the panel participants. Some of them are joining us as we speak, others are already online. So we will have on the panel Maja Tomanic-Vidovic, who is the director of the Slovene Enterprise Fund, bringing us some real-life experience from Slovenia and how access to finance is addressed in Slovenia. We have Christos Stojkov, head of growth finance and venture debt, equity, new products and special transactions directorate at the European Investment Bank. No need probably to introduce to you the important work that the EIB is doing for access to finance, but he will certainly share his experience with us on that. We have Philippe Huberdeau, who is the Secretary General for Scale Up Europe on behalf of the Presidency of the French Republic. Extremely important work that they have been doing during the French presidency of the EU. We have Gitte Pedersen, who is the CEO and co-founder of Genomic Expression, also a board member at Expression Biotechnologies. She will be bringing us some real business perspective to the discussion on access to finance. And finally, certainly last but not least, Vicky Kefalas, who is a member of the European Innovation Council's board, and she's also a member of the investment committee of the InvestEU fund. This means that she is engaged in everyday decision-making on specific investment. She's very well versed in the area of access to finance. So before we kick off with the discussion, let me give you the good news. The good news is that Europe is now amongst the fastest growing regions in private capital investment. If we look back in a few years' time, between 2016 and 2020, the growth that the EU experienced in this area was faster than the one in China or in the US. This also resulted specifically in success stories for startups. So European startups are now making up a big chunk, approximately 1/3 of all the capital invested globally in smaller rounds of investment, so up to $5 million US dollars, compared to pretty much the same that the US has in this market. This wasn't always like this. Europe is catching up and has equalized. Now, if we look at deep tech startups in particular, which we will discuss in a bit more detail, the picture is probably even more promising. What we see there is that these startups, only this year, until now, so approximately the first 9 months of the year, have already raised 12 billion euros, which is more than they have raised in the entire 2021, so last year. This is a positive story. However, the EU is still significantly lagging behind when it comes to scale-ups compared to the US and compared to China. This is because scale-up financing is not doing as well as that for startups. We have a number of problems which have been highlighted in the innovation agenda that previous speakers in the plenary session have mentioned. We still lack in the EU venture capital funds who are really willing to subscribe to larger capital investments. 70% of these large investment rounds, 70%, have been driven by overseas investors in the past. We also have an undersized IPO market, which is not favorable for companies trying to bring in additional capital. And if we put all these factors together, what we see is that European companies are often leaving. They're often leaving the EU, including two areas, overseas areas, where, for example, listings or other trade deal conditions are more favorable. Now, this is why one of the flagship areas of the European Innovation Agenda that has been presented in the first session at the Research and Innovation Days focuses on this specific area. It's one of the 5 flagship areas. How can the EU accelerate the growth of scale-ups, especially deep tech scale-ups in the EU? So let me give you 5 examples what the agenda does, and then we bring in the panelists on how they perceive these, what more needs to be done. So first, reducing the cost of new equity. As you know, probably there's now a Commission proposal on the table that would allow companies to have a reduction allowance on the debt equity from their corporate income tax. This will hopefully reduce the cost of raising equity. It's a constant problem, used to be a constant problem in the EU. Second, we need to incentivize companies that they list in the EU. So there will be a Listings Act, which will come from the Commission still before the end of the year. This will simplify listing requirements, and this will also allow certain founders to actually retain some control post-listing. Again, something which many of our founders in the EU have been requesting, and they consider this a problem. Then we also have a set of actions which will improve later stage venture capital financing. There is the European Scale-Up Action for Risk Capital, very powerful instrument. This will be scaled up. There will also be a collection, convening of different leaders of large institutional investors, pension, insurance funds, sovereign wealth funds, to discuss with them how European scale-up venture capital funds can be further increased. Let's just say that the money is out there. The money is out there. There is 13 trillion euros worth of assets under management in the EU. This is with institutional private investors, private pension funds, insurance companies. What can we do to mobilize part of this, part of these assets for riskier investments in the scale-up area? And finally, we will also assess, this is a commitment from the Commission side, to see the complementarities between the different existing instruments that are already there. We have InvestEU, we have the European Innovation Council, we now have the recovery and resilience plans, much of them, part of them focusing on research and innovation. We have great initiatives like the European Tech Champions Initiative, to which the EIB group is also contributing. What can we do together with all these initiatives to scale up Europe and the deep tech companies in particular? So this is the scene setter that I would suggest our panelists to reflect upon. Now we will have a good discussion, limited in time. I will ask the panelists to limit their interventions to approximately 2 minutes. So first I'm turning to Maya, and then I will follow up with the other panelists. And to Maya, the question is, how well do you think that the proposed actions that are now in the innovation agenda, how well do they address the challenges that the companies who want to scale up in Europe are facing? Is it adequate, also in your experience from a Slovenian perspective? Maya, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And first of all, on behalf of the Slovenian Enterprise Fund, welcome to all the participants of today's event. So, as a national fund with a lot of EU resources, more than 80% of our resources comes from EU different programs and funds. So we support a lot of scale-ups companies in Slovenia with debt, grants, and also equity financing. But if we want to think about how to support or to scale up them also in the future, especially in this EU environment, of course, we have to be focused on the current circumstances in which we are living. We lag behind before, we lag behind still now together with these companies, but our focus now is a little bit more different than it was maybe 2-3 years ago. Why? Because of new challenges which we are focusing, and of course all these new challenges are very important and has an impact on our companies too. So just mention one of them. We live in an era of rising global instability, and this global instability revealed global vulnerability and our dependence on technological solutions and platforms. We live in an era of inequality, especially inequality in access to resources. Resources become restrictive and will become even more restrictive. And this is where our scale-ups have to deal with every day. We are facing with bigger and bigger climate changes. We are facing with risks which are even higher than before, and how to force now risk capitalists to invest in our scale-up companies, which are now even in a riskier time than maybe 2 years ago. Of course, costs are increasing, and we are still facing with lack of capacity and resources, especially of our scale-up companies. Resources, financial resources, but not only financial resources, also some resources in skills and in knowledge, in some know-how, experiences, and so on. So therefore, their contributions to internationalization activities, in global activities, which are needed because of all these circumstances in which we are living, are still too small. So how to support them even more in this innovation landscape in Europe, which are very big, I agree, it's very big, but still too fragmented. First of all, we all have to become more agile, creative, and shift. We must be focusing more on priority topics, also in the sectors of companies. And the future will demand even more innovative and collaborative solutions, which brings together disruptive technologies, research institutions, knowledge-based institutions, policymakers all together. So yes, new European innovation agenda is focused on all these topics, and it's very welcome in scale-up ecosystem, of course. But I really strongly and sincerely hope that all implementation activities will be very well organized, connected, and will allow us to be even more connected in this fragmented ecosystem that maybe we were before. So this is my first opinion.
Thank you very much, Maya. Spot on. I think you have identified indeed some of the key challenges, not only related to access to finance, but also in other areas where innovation policy and the levers of innovation policy can make a difference. Christo, I'm turning to you with your experience from the EIB. You have and the bank that you're representing has taken a number of measures and is really one of the prime actors in addressing the scale-up gap in Europe. Are you satisfied with what this European innovation agenda has put on the table? Do you think it has addressed the right challenges? What more do you think needs to be done at the EU level to fill particularly the scale-up gap?
Hello, everyone. And hello, Andras. Thank you for the invitation. And first of all, I want to start by saying a great job for the colleagues of the Commission putting all this together. For someone that works for a policy bank, I know it's not easy to translate policy into direct impact. And having such a complex issue as tackling the European venture capital system and the scale up in more particular terms, it's not an easy task because there is no one single solution. For 15 years, I've been heading the front office of the EIB, and I've been on the forefront of delivering financing for innovation. 15 years ago, we were lagging the US. We said that we spend 1.5% on compared to GDP on R&D. And now 15 years later, we are approaching, and I share the message that we are getting there. It's around 2.2% right now, and the aim is to bring it to around 3%. That was 15 years ago, the aim. And what I've seen from our experience and what I see in the paper that you propose, that there are certain new initiatives in this one that I believe are very important and interesting, and we're really excited about them. For example, focusing on scale-ups is something new. 7 years ago, EIB realized that there is a big gap in financing of late-stage venture capital companies. As you well know, or if you don't know, EIF, the European Innovation Fund, is a subsidiary of the EIB group, and through it, we are technically a fund-of-fund investor in around 60+% of all the venture capital funds in Europe. So we have a fairly good overview of what the VC ecosystem is doing. And building the ecosystem is something that we've done for many years. You need a big base of the pyramid in order to have good scale-ups and unicorns. And that's what we've been doing with the colleagues from the European Investment Fund for years. Introducing new fund managers in Eastern Europe, introducing new targets and objectives, and backing them with our own capital and with capital of our colleagues from the Commission. And that we've been doing for years, but there was a big part missing, and that was the late stage. Very often we see companies And I'll give you an example. For example, UiPath in Romania, a company that grew up from Eastern Europe, developing a very innovative solution, for example, for something that we call digital robots, so automation of processing. When they reach a certain stage, they had to move to the US, list there, and get financing from Google and the likes in order to reach a unicorn status. This type of companies, we've seen quite a few. And 7 years ago, we ran a study of 35,000 companies in the EIB across Europe. And we realized that they're really lagging behind in late stage growth capital. And what we did is we launched our venture debt program, which until today we invested around 4 billion euros in early stage companies, 180 companies, with average ticket sizes between 20 and 50 million euros. The success of this program has been overwhelming. The demand is extremely high, and we see that this market failure is persisting. So a lot of the points in the agenda that you outlined, Andras and colleagues, are really addressing these points. For example, more innovation in public procurement, I believe, is key for early stage companies. If they find clients for their ideas in local governments, that gives them stability of cash flows. For example, sandboxes. I mean, having the sandbox in UK allowed companies like Revolut, for example, to experiment with banking models that was not so easily done in Europe. Supporting IPOs and exits through regulation and through unification of capital markets. It's extremely interesting thing that I believe that governments, the European Commission and institutions like ours should really back up. The success of our program for 7 years now has been quite interesting because we just launched a study in the summer that is unique in its nature because we compared the companies that we backed with late stage growth capital 7 years ago with a control group to find out, do they really fare better? Do they really invest more in R&D? Do they have better valuations? Do they have more access to capital? And guess what? Independent study confirmed this summer that all of these assumptions became true. So I really believe that this agenda that you put forward, backed with some money from the European Commission, from the European Investment Bank, member states, national promotion institutions, will be able to catalyze private capital and bring us to the next stage in bridging the gap with Europe and Asia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Risto. Thanks for giving us that comprehensive European overview that you have and bringing some of the real life examples of what it means when the market is not delivering for promising companies like the one in Romania that you have mentioned, which really illustrates that there's more to be done, both at European and possibly also at national level. We'll come to that in the upcoming discussion. Thanks a lot for that. So I'm turning now to Philip. Philip, you have during the French presidency you have launched an excellent initiative which already put the spotlight specifically on the problem of the scale-up gap. So then came the innovation agenda with that focus on the access to finance, specifically on the scale-up part. How do you see the picture now? Are we addressing the right problems? What more needs to be done? How can the scale-up initiative in particular contribute to these objectives? Philip. I think you're muted. At least I don't hear you.
Sorry for that.
Very good.
Thank you very much. So thank you, yes, for mentioning all the work we did under the Scale Up Europe initiative for 2 years now. It's an initiative in which we are working with 300 founders and VC funds throughout Europe. And the idea was really to come with ideas which come from the ecosystem and to put them to our governments and the European Commission. And so one of the first results is the ETCI mentioned, the European Tech Champion Initiatives, which will be a fund of fund, which will be managed by the EIB and the EIF. So we will draw really on the massive expertise already accumulated by the EIB, and our EIB colleague rightly mentioned that they already have a vast amount of expertise. But then to plug really this gap in scale-up financing, which really was something we wanted to achieve. And so the idea with this fund of fund is to channel 10 billion euros of financing into VC funds, to create large VC funds at the scale of the Europe, which are able to finance also late stage rounds in our companies. Because right now, when you look at it, you have like 40 VC funds in the US that have the magnitude of 2 billion or more. And we only have something like 3 of these funds in Europe. So really, we need to have more of these players in Europe that will be able to finance the scaling up of companies and also to finance scaling up of companies that will stay in Europe. So that means that the job will stay in Europe, the value added will stay in Europe, the IP will stay in Europe, and so on. And so this ETCI initiative is about to become a reality. The fund of fund will be closed by end of the year and will be operational next year. So, which is already a great, I think, achievement. And but we are already looking beyond that of complementary measures, because in your introduction you also rightly mentioned that there is a vast amount of work programs that has to be addressed to really get it right. And we also have to really get on board all the private actors. So the institutional investors, the limited partners, so we have to get on board the insurances, pension funds, to make sure that a greater chunk of the 13 trillion euros of asset under management that we have in Europe can be invested in our startups and scale-ups. And then, of course, on the other side, we also have the markets. And I think the Listing Act is really a very important also measure that will help to get more our companies to go public. And it will also, of course, help the VC financing, because if you have more exit, then you can recycle the financing in other companies. So, and we see that there is movement as well on this side with, for instance, the Euronext Tech Leaders initiatives that has been taken by Euronext to give more visibility to the tech companies, the European tech companies that are listed, and to encourage more of our companies to list into Europe and not in the US. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip, and thanks indeed also for the good news on the significant progress made on the European Tech Champions Initiative, because I think that timing corresponds, as you mentioned, very much with the financing needs in this market. So great progress on that. Thanks a lot. Turning to Gitte now, because everything that we do through the different public institutions and instruments that we have mentioned so far are essentially there to have success stories from private companies like yours. So we would be, I think, quite curious to hear from you what is the role of policymakers in driving things like innovation strategies and agendas, pulling some of the public policy and the funding levers, especially the ones that we have set out in the European Innovation Agenda. Is that going to help you? Do you like what's in it? And what is missing for a company like yours?
So first of all, I want to say that I was very excited to read this document. Having been through the cycle of the painful experience of having to go out and constantly raise small amounts of money to get to the next milestone, which delays everything, I was very excited to read that there was now put in place funding mechanisms that could scale up at a higher speed. And why is that important? It's important because innovation cycles are increasing. And what I've seen, we've been part of the task force, so to speak, to solve the issues with access to testing, with expression. It was also developing vaccines. To be able to do that in the timeframes that were given, there had to be access to capital very quickly and selecting the right projects to advance. So access to funding, and what we learned from that experience is that we can develop vaccines much faster with the right mechanisms and the right funding mechanisms and the right technologies. So I wanna say that the so to speak party have just begun. With the right funding mechanisms, Europe is in a very strong position because of the innovation infrastructure to capitalize on the next generation of innovations. So overall, I'm very pleased. I will say, if there's any piece, you asked me if there's any piece that's missing, it would be, I think we, from a very strategic policy standpoint, need to understand that certain technologies that we need to implement now need to be economically incentivized. So this is beyond what we're talking about here. But what's on my mind is, of course, greening of energy sources, carbon neutrality, and those kind of things. We don't have the time we thought we had, so we need to speed that up.
Great, thanks so much, Gitte. It's a very, very pertinent example, and thanks for sharing that experience with us. It's good to know that what we try to identify as the main problems in helping Europe improve its innovation performance resonate quite well also with the business on the ground. So thanks for that. We'll come back on the role of the private sectors in particular in the last round of questions. But I want to now move on to Vicky, because Vicky, you're in a particular situation. You have seen different investment mechanisms, funds operate with different investment, slightly different investment strategies behind them. But you are now involved both in InvestEU and the European Innovation Council. How do you see, is the innovation agenda sufficiently recognizing the importance of these instruments? Are these instruments that you know very well from practice, are they delivering? And what more needs to be done to make these instruments that you know very well, but also other possibly funding or policy instruments, needs to be made to improve them? Vicky.
Thank you, Andras, and great to be here with everyone, very distinguished colleagues and speakers for this panel. Speaking last, I have the chance to have heard everybody, and I could not agree more. First of all, with Maya, we live in dynamic and changing times. The economic conditions that the agenda is coming into force with are really unprecedented and unexpected. At the start of this year, at the start of 2022, we all expected to go with an upswing, and now we find ourselves at a time of slowing growth, of high and persistent inflation, of the energy crisis, and of course of several downside projected scenarios. So if venturing has always been a challenge, venturing into innovation and deep tech is even more challenging. Now you add this economic environment and outlook, and you have really a very difficult situation. The agenda, with its 5 pillars and 25 actions, presents quite a holistic framework. It deals not only with providing tangible funding through programs like the IC and especially the IC Accelerator, and of course, InvestEU. However, it addresses other fundamental structural and policy issues. It addresses the regulatory framework. It addresses a lot of very, very specific areas. I think it was Christo that mentioned the regulatory sandboxes, which we see now more and more adopted in different countries. In Greece, I'm very happy to see in my own country that the Bank of Greece has created a regulatory sandbox to allow fintech companies to try out their innovations. For me, the agenda is quite well placed. We have sitting on the IC board, I have the privilege to be exposed to a lot of the detailed actions that we put into the work program. We've added program managers to focus now on specific sectors such as food and space and challenges that are demand solutions, demand technology solutions. And they're highly pertinent: food security, energy storage, reducing energy dependency. So the agenda is quite well placed. However, it needs to recognize and remain dynamic. And to this effect, the IC and the agency and the Commission is quite responsive and agile to take in the market and the global events. Just recently, at the IC, we extended 20 million from the existing budget to support Ukrainian innovation. And this is something that we need to keep in mind, that such an agenda needs to be responsive and alert to the forces. I will use the rest of my time to use some of the catchphrases that are very, very important. I used to sit on the previous fund of InvestEU, on the predecessor fund, which is EFSI, the European Fund for Strategic Investments. And I've understood very well and witnessed the power of using public funding to mobilize multiples of private additional capital. EFSI was able to use some 33.5 billion to raise and mobilize, I think, about 525 billion in total, and to reach several companies. I think the statistics, I don't have them in front of me, but I think we gave support to almost 1.5 million SMEs in Europe. So I think using, making every euro of public programs, whether EIC, InvestEU, Escalar, other instruments, we have to make every euro count and attract additional, crowd in additional private capital. That would be a success, to crowd in, not to displace existing capital. Also, I will mention something that Andras mentioned in his opening speech: the complementarity and the synergistic use that we need to get out of the EU instruments. I think there are many EU instruments right now, and plus at the national level, there are many, many programs supporting startups and SMEs in each of the countries, the development banks, that there should be an EU funding solution from research to startup, to scale up, to SME. There should be financing completeness and continuity to encourage companies to innovate in Europe and to stay in Europe.
Thank you very much, Vicky. It's very, very much appreciated. And indeed, the financing chain is something that we have also looked at within the Commission. As you said, there are quite a large number of financing instruments, both at the European and at the national level, by the way, and these need to come together in a very coherent and complementary way. So those who are starting out today with a simple idea to set up a new business, they can already see the lifetime and the way and the steps that they need to make to reach the final financing stage in their growth. And I think we are not there yet. So that recommendation is very much appreciated. Okay, thanks to all of you for the first round of quite extensive interventions. I'm conscious of the time, so what I will ask you now is really to, in 1 minute, not more than 1 minute, tell us what your institution, company, body that you are representing can do at your level to help this innovation agenda deliver, especially on access to finance. And I'm asking this because you have heard probably from the Commissioner that this is really a collective effort. That is as much as European institutions, Commission, the Parliament, Member States in the Council can do. Much of the work and the implementation will need to be done by the stakeholders, by you. So in essentially 1 minute, what can you offer that your institutional body does to support the innovation agenda? Maya, what does the Slovene Enterprise Fund do? What can it help us to deliver on the agenda? I think you're muted, Maya.
Yes, okay, I already did. Well, okay, very briefly, it's not the problem only on access to finance. For example, in Slovenia, there is a lot of available financing resources, also private one, but for the good, very well prepared, development-oriented projects. So we have to be focused to motivate scale-ups, to keep innovating and collaborating, especially on this global level, to be available, to do something available with the
I think
the projects on the global development, not on lower investments. And this is very important. So what we need to do to be more focused on creation of synergies with already existing initiatives and to find out the right environment, the right conditions for scale-ups that they need among policymakers, research institutions, know-how institutions, and support institutions, for example, like Slovene Enterprise Fund. So we will create a more sustainable development partnership among all these partners and involve our scale-ups in these partnerships. And we believe that with this more organized focus, also on financing level, we can increase the quality and the value of the projects of our scale-ups.
Thanks very much, Maya. Christo, what can the EIB group do beyond what is already doing currently?
Well, Andres, I don't want to steal the thunder, of course, but the European Tech Champions was already mentioned, so our colleagues from EIF will be working extremely hard. What I can say is that the EIB Group is looking to contribute a few of the capital of the bank that we have into some of these initiatives ourselves in order to leverage and attract third-party money, as it was said earlier. Our idea is to de-risk some of these ideas by bringing a layer of public money that will bring expertise and money together in order to scale up this initiative. And hopefully, by the end of it, we're going to have a dozen of European fund managers that can underwrite hundreds of millions of euros single tickets in late-stage venture capital financing. We will continue to, of course, expand our venture debt program and hopefully partner up with national promotional institutions and private funds that are interested to do that. And we're extremely excited about our role in the EIC Accelerator, especially through the EIC Fund and our partnership with the Commission, because we see that as one of the main tools to widen the base of the pyramid. And the bigger the base of the pyramid it is, the more scale-ups and the more opportunities we're going to see in the future. So these are by far not all the initiatives. We're of course looking to expand our intervention in gender financing. So we estimate that if we deploy certain money into what we call 2X initiative type of companies, so companies that want to promote gender equality, will bring substantial increase in available funding for R&D, and also it will lead to expansion in GDP. We also gonna, of course, focus on energy and sustainability and environmental and climate change. So we are already hitting 25% targets on our lending in this area, and we expect to continue. What we really want to see furthermore done is a bit more help on national level to the early stage companies, especially related to stock options, regulatory regimes for debt and equity arbitrage. So all this has to be tackled in order for companies to be able to remunerate their employees, retain them, and be able to raise risk-absorbing capital in the form of equity. That will help us also bring in the EIB resources, because our objective, as it was said, is not to crowd out the private sector. We need to attract it, and we have to make these investments less risky and more attractive for private investors from a regulatory point of view and from a technological and financial point of view.
Thanks a lot, Risto. That's a long list of commitments already. Thanks a lot for that. We'll be in touch to deliver on them one by one. Philip, you probably already delivered, or you are in the process of delivery on the ETSI. Is there anything else you can offer?
Yes, of course. And as I mentioned before, I think the private actors really have a key role to play. So I think what we'll try and do in the next months is really to mobilize as well the private actors around this shared objective. And we already have a community of 300 founders and VCs. They are really strongly mobilized, and they really want to be part of this European project. Actually, it's a common European project. But we have to also mobilize other private actors like pension funds, insurances, but also the big corporates. The big corporates have a key role to play also as well to help startups to scale up. By being clients, by being partners, by integrating some of these scale-ups into their business models. And so to mobilize all these actors, what we need to do is perhaps to publicize success stories more, to have more data, to consolidate more data about the success and the return on investment of scale-ups. And perhaps also to
Philip,
create
thanks a lot. I need to move on to Gitte. Thanks for that comprehensive list. I want to give Gitte the opportunity to come in and say what Genomic Expression can say.
So I would say make the application process as easy as possible. Have been through Horizon 2020 and all the hurdles. It makes it very difficult. So I think when I think about the timelines that we need to start operating with, speed is of the essence. Making it fast and easy is going to be important. Number one. Number two, there's a difference between grants, equity, and loans. And grants should be non-punitive. You should be willing to take risk, and you should be willing to fail. And that's the difference. It's a mindset. And I would say that it's a major difference between some of the Europeans' minds said, you want everything to succeed. If you go in and invest with that framework, you will not take the sufficient risk to have the big winners.
Thanks a lot, Gitte. Thanks so much. Vicky, probably the last word. A nice commitment to conclude.
Okay, EIC Accelerator program, I think, needs to remain and to retain and increase its firepower. It is the primary and largest deep tech VC in Europe to be able to come in at this early stage of the life cycle of startups, and it needs really to be there because there is nothing else other than private owned VCs or private capital of the companies and the founders themselves that can help these companies take off and find solutions and develop new technology. In terms of InvestEU, I want to say that it is progressing very well. We have approved over almost 7.8 billion of guarantee, which of course results in multiple investment and private capital attracted, with a total of 51 operations, and about 14 of them relate to research, innovation,
Vicky,
and digitization.
thanks a lot. Thank you, all of you, for the participation. Many commitments made, good points made. We will take it back with us. Thanks to be with us on this journey to implement the innovation agenda. Wishing you an excellent rest of the day. Thank you very much.